Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to wait a couple minutes to see if anybody else joins us, and then I'll start on the presentation. Can everyone give a thumbs up if you can see my share screen with the presentation? Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I had seen some other people had registered, but the meeting's recorded, so they can go back and review the beginning if they need to. I'm Amanda Swanson. I'm the program coordinator for the Division of Agriculture, and we also have Tony Strait on here from the Division of Ag. Tony is working on all of our micro grant closeouts right now, and then I'm overseeing the specialty crop block grant. Our grant administrator position is currently vacant, so I'm the main point of contact for the specialty crop block grant at this time. Okay, so quick overview on what the specialty crop are that qualify for a specialty crop block grant. That's fruits, vegetables, culinary herbs and spices, medicinal herbs and plants, nursery, floriculture, and horticulture crops, honey, and kelp. And for a full list of what's eligible specialty crops, you can go to this link here. It's also in the request for applications document, which is on our website, which will bring you to the USDA site. What are not considered specialty crops are grains, dairy, livestock, bees, corn, hay, and hemp. Some of these crops are covered under other programs through USDA. And I just wanted to clarify here, honey is considered a specialty crop, but bees are not. USDA actually considers bees as livestock. So if you wanted to do like a specialty crop block grant project using honey as an end product, like using it in cooking demonstrations um, or as, looking to nutritional content, other things like that, you could do a specialty crop block grant for that. But looking at like invasive pests that impact beehives, that would not be considered a specialty crop block grant project. So this is a much shorter application timeline than we typically do. We usually release our request for applications in January and start that process each year for a specialty crop. We usually include a letter of intent first, where people submit their project ideas. That way we can kind of help provide some guidance on, whether or not the project idea is eligible for the specialty crop program or not. This year we were waiting on a few different things. We were waiting for see if the Farm Bill would pass through Congress. We had also seen that on the multi-state specialty crop block grant program, they had required a 25% match. And we had heard that there might be some program changes to specialty crop as well. And we didn't want to release a request for applications and then later have to change it if there were any program changes. So that's part of the reason why we are so late for releasing the RFA this year. So due to the short timeline, we are removing the letter of intent requirement and we're going straight to the full application. And those full applications are due on May 20th by 5 p.m. And they need to be emailed to the dag.scbg@alaska.gov. stands for Division of Agriculture, Specialty Crop Block Grant. Please do not send your applications directly to me. Please make sure that you send them to this inbox. Any applications that are received after 5 p.m. will not be considered for funding for this year. Then our applications that we receive will be reviewed between May 21st through the 28th, with final decisions being made on May 29th. Our state plan is due to USDA by June 8th. Otherwise, they will not consider our state application if it's not received in time. Then as USDA is reviewing our application, they may have some updates or revisions requested before we get the final approval in the fall. And then all of our projects have a start date of September 30th, the ones that are selected for funding. So review for the program. The purpose of this program is to award projects that enhance the competitiveness of Alaska specialty crops. That includes leveraging efforts to market and promote, assisting producers with research and development, expanding availability and access to specialty crops, and addressing local, regional, and national challenges. Again, a letter of intent is not required as part of the application process this year. There are some important updates to the program. There are new AMS general terms and conditions and USDA updated general terms and conditions that will impact all of our programs. So it's really important for you to visit those links and to review them. Some of that's going to apply to just the state as the grantee. So not everything's going to necessarily apply to our sub-grantees, but please make sure that you are reviewing it for eligible expenditures for grant and knowing what's allowed and what's not allowed under this grant program. And beginning next year, there will be a cost share requirement of 25% of the federal funds requested. That can be cash or in kind. So that's not going to impact this year. I'm glad that USDA decided to give everyone a heads up first. But it will be required for next year. So, and it's by award year. So if you get awarded a 26 specialty crop block grant, you don't have to have a match in the 27, 28. It's just based on your award year. So if you apply for specialty crop block grant next year, you will be required to do a cost share of 25% of the federal funds requested. Eligible applicants can include universities, producer groups, extension services, soil and water conservation districts, and schools. Applicants that have previously had incomplete or unsatisfactory performance might be enrolled ineligible for participation. Same as last year, the maximum funding amount we're allowing per sub-grantee project is $60,000. We want to see minimum number of producers impacted is 5. Again, this grant is really not just for benefit for one particular producer. We want to make sure that it's going to be having an impact on Alaska, specialty crop industry as a whole. The maximum duration of the project is 3 years. And all projects run on the same timeline from September 30th to September 29th. So if you have a smaller scope project where you don't need the full 3 years, that's fine. If you have a study that or activity that can be completed in 1 or 2 years, that's fine, but it's going to be that same timeline from September 30th of the current year to September 29th of the following year. We do need to have letters of support that are submitted with your application. That's required from industry stakeholders who are not directly related to the project. So letters of support can't be from somebody who is going to be a project partner. And then again, we want to see industry professional partners required. So if it's like a group of producers that's maybe working with the university to do a study on like pest control or disease management or something like that. We want to see the more cooperation that's in your grant and the more people who are participating, the more competitive your application is going to be. Again, USDA will not award projects or for projects whose products or services promote or provide profit that solely benefits a single organization, institution, or individual. And recipients and subrecipients cannot use grant funds to compete unfairly with companies that provide equivalent products or services. So single organizations, institutions, and individuals are encouraged to participate as project partners. And grant funds cannot be used towards farm production. That's a frequent question that we get on this grant program. Again, it's really not for production related activities. It's for like marketing, research, and development. These are our funding priorities through the program: enhancing food safety, especially crop research, developing new and improved seed varieties, pest and disease control, increasing child and adult nutrition knowledge, improving efficiency and reducing costs, and sustainability. And how we rank these funding priorities each year is we do a stakeholder survey. So please go to the stakeholder priority survey that is in the request for applications and complete that. That will help us determine which projects we're going to prioritize for the year. Full applications must be submitted on the USDA template. It is an interactive template that they provide. You do have to download the template and save it to a folder and then open it directly from that folder. If you try to open it from your download folder, that pops up at the top of your webpage window, you're going to get a error message. And we do have a video posted on our website that will help walk you through being able to open that template. But the application does have to be submitted on that template. It can't be converted to Word. It can't be print to PDF. It has to stay as that interactive template because when it comes to me, I have to upload all of that information into Grant Solutions website where we submit our state plan online. So I need to be able to copy and paste that information in. In prior years, I've been able to work with people to, accept it on Word or print to PDF, and then fill it out for everybody. But due to this tight timeline and also being down staff, we're not going to be able to do that this year. So it really needs to be on that USDA template or else we're not going to be able to accept it. It also has important fields in there with information that we need. And if you're not using the template, you might miss some important required information that USDA needs for your project. It must include, and at the end here, I'm going to pull up the application itself just to run a few things as well. I must include target numbers for at least one of 7 outcomes listed, and it must have at least one indicator. And the thing here that I would strongly recommend on your application is to pick maybe 1 or 2 outcomes and indicators. Do not over-select because every year for your annual and final reports, you're going to have to report on each of the outcomes and indicators that you selected. And the more you have, the more that you have to track and more you have to report on. And if you have multiple, it makes it pretty difficult to report on everything. And there's also limited space in the reporting to be able to report on those as well. And then also indirect cost, as in previous years, they're not allowed for our subawards. USDA caps the especially crop block grants at 8% of the total award, including what the state can take. So the state needs to have the indirect cost to cover our administrative costs to administer this program. This is the application scoring breakdown. This is also in the request for applications. And you can see where it's weighed heavily on the points. Again, it's weighed more on the project purpose to make sure it fits the intent of the specialty crop block grant. The external project support and impact and outcomes is where it's weighed pretty heavily. So again, the more project partners you have, the more letters of support, the more competitive your application is going to be. Oh, and let me just go back real quick. So past project performance, if you've not had a specialty crop block grant with us in the past, those points will be included. But if you've had past project performance with us in the past and it's not been good performance, didn't submit your reports, didn't have receipts or backup documentation for your reimbursement request, that's when it will start negatively impacting your score. And I'll answer questions here at the end. I do see that some are coming through the chat, so we'll take a look at that here at the end. Grant agreement contract, again, is maximum 3 years, so it would go from September 30th of 2026 to September 29th of 2029 if you are awarded a grant. The fund distribution, we give 25% advance upfront to begin the projects. The remaining funds are on a reimbursement basis. We're going to do a separate video to talk about the reimbursement process at a later time. I don't want to overwhelm everyone with information, but basically when you start submitting your reimbursement, you will have to account what that 25% advance payment went towards first before we start dispersing the reimbursements. And then annual reports will be required. They're due 30 days after the end of each performance period. So like each annual report would be due at the end of October, and then final report at the end of your grant performance period. So again, please send your email questions to the Specialty Crop Block Grant folder and not directly to me. We don't want your questions getting buried in my inbox. So if you send it here, there's me, Tony, and some other staff people who are monitoring the grant email to make sure that we're addressing all of our questions. And let me look at the chat. I was going to pull up the template here, but let me look at what we got in the chat. Okay. So we had a question about the new terms and conditions, and thank you, Robbie, for sharing that tool. It is quite a bit of information on the general terms and conditions. So if there's anything in there specifically that you see that you have a question on, please feel free to reach out. Producer group examples. That could be a like group of producers that are all working on like a similar specialty crop, and like say a group of potato producers, and there is a disease in their area that they are concerned about, doing some sort of study, working with the Plant Material Center or the university on ways, or the division here on ways to mitigate that disease control would be an idea of a project. Or if there is a particular product that producers want to explore the market for, kind of a new innovative product, that would be something that they could apply for. So if you have a specific project in mind, please feel free to reach out to me directly and we can kind of brainstorm and I can give you some guidance on that project. If you've had past projects with a different organization, should we list that if we were the project manager? Robbie, are you talking about, here, let's see here. I think you can unmute yourself now. Robbie, could you give me more information on what you meant by that question? Oh. Okay, I'm going to move on and pull up the application template here.
Oh, hey, Amanda.
Hey, there you are.
I kept trying to unmute. I'm sorry. I wasn't ghosting you.
Oh, that's okay.
Through the Farmers Market Association and Cook Inlet Keeper, we had a past specialty crop block grant, and I would be applying for a different organization. So is it more the organization or the project manager for the 8 points piece?
That's it's more on the organization.
Okay, so I'll leave that
because
blank
that would
and
be the applicant.
get the 8 points anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions before we move on? I think everyone should be able to unmute their mics now. I just updated the settings. Okay. So this is what the application template from USDA looks like. So you'll complete your organization information here. You will need a UEI number. So if you don't have one, it can take several weeks to get approved. So you'll want to go to sam.gov and follow the steps to get a UEI number. I'm not going to go into detail on that on this webinar, but if you have any issues with that, please let me know. And then you'll put your project title, start date and end date. Again, remember it's going to be September 30th through September 29th. Project partner and summary will be 250 words or less, just a brief description of what your project overall scope is going to be. And make sure when you're completing this section on your project partner and summary, this is outlining your overall project scope of your project. And if it's accepted and approved, you do have to stay within your project scope. Otherwise, we would have to do an amendment request to change that. And we can't really approve any major changes to your project scope once it's approved. Then you'll talk about your specific issue, problem, or need that the project will address. Here you'll list your objectives for the project. These are like your overall goals for what you are hoping to achieve with your project. I would recommend doing 2 to 3 objectives. Again, same with the outcomes and indicators. Don't overstate objectives because these you have to report on it every year as well. And in your report, there's going to be an accomplishments and a challenges and development section, and you'll need to make sure your accomplishments and challenges and developments are addressing each of your objectives. And so again, the more you have, especially if you have, 6, 7, 8 objectives, that's a lot of information that you're having to track and report on each year. So keep it easy on yourself and just have, I'd recommend 2 to 3 main objectives, which are going to be your goals, overall goals for the project. Project beneficiaries, how many direct and indirect beneficiaries you're going to have for the project. If this is a continuation of a previously funded project, you would provide that information here. USDA will not fund the same project each year if it's one that's kind of developing or building off of a previous project or expanding a previous project, it can, like, say you wanted to do like kind of an initial small scale testing on a variety trial, and then the next time you wanted to expand that into further testing or next stages, then you could do a subsequent specialty crop block grant project. Beneficiaries we're looking at with the specialty crop block grant projects for beneficiaries, we're looking at specialty crop industry and who it's going to be impacting, like farmers mostly. It's not the same as like with our micro grants where your beneficiaries are like the people that you're feeding out of the group. This is more industry and producer focused. What if the previous project wasn't yours, but it is related? I would say it's going to depend on, I think, how close it is. That's a good question. Do you know if that previous project was also funded through a specialty crop block grant through Alaska Division of Ag? Okay. It might be good to mention it here. Just so if USDA has any questions about it, if they're familiar with the project, then it's already kind of being addressed. So I would go ahead and expand on how your project, and it'll be good information for the review committee to have as well. If they look at the project and they're like, oh, we already funded that, why are we funding it again? Then you're already providing an explanation of, how this project is going to build on similar projects we've done in the past. So again, provide a summary of the outcomes of previous efforts and describe how it will differ. The space in here to put those. Okay, I'm gonna scroll down. The other thing is we want to see that the project, especially if it's building off of previous projects, is how it's going to become self-sustaining and not a project that's going to rely indefinitely on grant funds. There are samples of funded awards. It's in the request for applications. There should be a link, and you can also find it on our Division of Ag webpage. And if you go to the USDA site, you can also see projects that they've funded by state. So the USDA will publish a full listing of all of the projects that they fund for all 50 states and territories. And you can find that on our Division of Ag site as well. There should be a link to it in the request for applications, but you can also find it under our grants page. If the grant is being also receiving funds from another federal or state grant program, you would need to identify that information here. And then here is where you will list your external project support. And again, we'd like to see letters included with this as well. Please do not just list it here. We need to have those letters of support in addition to. And make sure your external project support is from industry stakeholders that are not going to be directly related or working on the project with you. So here is the outcomes section. This is why the interactive template is important, because depending on what your project scope is, you'll be selecting one or two outcome measures. And when you click on it, it's going to give you a list of indicators related to that outcome. So then you'll have to come through and the indicators are basically going to be how you're measuring your project outcomes. And you're going to put in here an estimated value. So we've done a couple of projects with schools, and they were, doing greenhouse work and developing curriculum for their school kids. So you would put in here, okay, how many children are these educational classes going to impact? Or somebody's doing some cooking classes and you're going to have them in person, then how many attendees do you think you're going to have? And then you would put the value of the adults here. Like I'm going to have, 8 cooking classes with 20 people per class. You would put that total value in here. And then each year when you're reporting on it, then you would report on what your data is. And you'll have to make sure you're tracking how you are measuring these values. They want to know your data methods. And you can only report on the outcomes and indicators that you selected in your original state plan. If you want to add or take away outcomes and indicators, those would all require an amendment. So make sure you think through this. And again, don't over-select because the more you pick them, the more you have to report on every year. But you do have to have at least one outcome and one indicator. Let's see. And then we're going down to the budget. So there's personnel cost. You can do fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, and contractual. So it's going to depend on what your project scope is. For personnel, you would need to list your personnel names, the amount of hours or effort you think they're going to spend on the award, and then funds requested. And then for each personnel, you'll need to give a justification for why they are essential to that project and what they're going to be working on. You can include fringe benefits with your personnel costs. Travel, this is important to go visit in the general terms and conditions and AMS terms and conditions. We do follow those for travel requirements. They do want to see each trip listed and then the estimated cost for that trip. So please don't put it like just a general travel here. They need to see more information. And if it's like mileage, they're wanting to see where you're departing from and where you're arriving to. So USDA is requesting a lot more information on these budgets and on the reimbursement requests. So the more information you include, the better. And we follow the AMS terms and conditions for determining the rates. Like the federal rate for mileage reimbursement is 67 cents per mile. We follow the per diem on the lodging rates. So if you have any questions over that, please feel free to reach out on that. And then for the travel justification, you will list here each trip, the justification, and including an approximate date of travel. We understand if it doesn't necessarily happen exactly on that date, but having an estimate would be good for your project. For equipment, it has to be special purpose equipment specifically related to the grant. USDA will not cover anything that's general equipment or that's more related to production activities versus like a variety trial. So make sure in your equipment and in your justification how it is related directly to the grant project. Same with supplies. They want to see itemized supply list. And on these interactive templates, you can just keep clicking the plus button anytime you need to add a supply cost, or you can take away if you add too many fields. And on equipment, anything over 10,000, a piece of equipment is needs to be reported on until the value of the equipment drops below 10,000. And that means it has to be reported on even if the grant period performance has closed. So if you buy a piece of equipment and it's valued at 15,000, even after your grant period performance has closed after 3 years, you still have to continue to report on that piece of equipment until the value has dropped below 10,000. If the acquisition cost of the equipment is less than 10,000, then it's actually going to be considered a supply. And so you want to put that under the supply. And again, supplies have to be related directly to the grant program. It can't be like for purchasing a computer because that's considered like general purpose and not specifically on the grant. And then contractual, there are specific rates for contractual. So if you have contractual costs and have any questions about that, please email me directly. I don't have what that rate is directly off the top of my head, but they do basically follow the federal rates for determining the contractual consultant costs as well. And then any other expenses that don't really fit into those previous categories, you can put down here. And then again, indirect is not going to be allowed for subgrantees. And then if you have any program income, you'll need to list it here and then describe how the program income is going to be reinvested back into the project. So say you're going to be holding some demonstration classes and you want to charge an admission fee that's going to go towards the rental of the venue or something like that. You would put that here under program income. So I see a question here. If we were working with producers, they would be contractual. Is there a rate for farmers? There's not a particular rate for farmers, Emily. Could you give me a little more information about what your project's going to be for or what you're thinking of?
Sure. Yeah, we were going to be working with producers in developing propagation protocols for certain plants, like Cornus canadensis or maybe, elderberry, things like that. And so we would be contracting with growers to research that.
Okay. If you want to send me an email, I will look up what that rate is and I'll send it to you. It's not really farmers specific. It's more of just an hourly rate for contractual. Okay, so that's the main things I wanted to go over today. Was there any additional questions over the specialty crop block grant project? And Anna, we don't have the actual proposals itself that we share. It's basically like a summary of the project and then sometimes the results. But we don't necessarily share the application itself.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Amanda, because I was looking at the reports, which were great. I appreciate you having them up there.
Uh-huh.
And on many of the reports, it didn't say who were performing the activity, like who the organization, the people were. So that I would love for that to be included in future reports to celebrate the people who were successful in their work, and for future applicants to know who to connect with too.
Yeah, we do try to manage a page on our division page that has all of our approved awards. We try to keep it as updated as possible. We do have limited staff capacity here though, because we also have the micro grant program. And we're currently down a grant administrator, but and then USDA does their publication too with a summary of all the approved awards. So if there's anything in particular that you're interested in, let me know. And I can send an email on that. And Emily, I agree, our 9-day timeline for review is aspirational, but we are we are on a much tighter timeline this year. We thought we would have until maybe July when USDA released the request for well, they call it a notice of funding opportunity now. They don't call it a request for applications anymore. So it is a tight timeline or a tight turnaround. I'm anticipating that for the projects that do get selected for funding, we'll probably need to do some additional revisions once USDA has reviewed them. Because especially since we're removing the letter of intent requirement this year, they'll probably need some additional polishing. But we just want to make sure that we do have some applications submitted to USDA by their deadline and to make sure that they're eligible projects, of course. Any other questions?
Yeah, Amanda, can you give us an idea of what the composition of the review board will be?
Yes, so those are normally volunteers within the specialty crop industry and agriculture industry here in Alaska. We try to keep it from being Division of Agriculture staff, but it is also kind of tough sometimes to get review committee because a lot of people we'd be reaching out to for being on the review committee might be actually submitting an application or they're advising on one. So we try to make sure that the review committee consists of people that are not going to be involved in a project. Usually, like Robbie, who's on here, has helped us many times, like with the Alaska Food Policy Council. We have, members from the Board of Agriculture, from the university, from Cooperative Extension. That we typically reach out to be on the review committee. So every year it kind of varies just depending on who's planning to apply for a project. And then who we can get who's not going to have a conflict of interest, but who's going to be a specialty crop expert. Anna, I saw your message. When is the Farm Bureau meeting?
Thank you. Yeah, anytime, whenever it will be possible for you, because we have individual committees that have monthly meetings, and a producer meeting just happened last week, and so I think I just talked to Ken Hoffman up in Anchorage, who is our statewide. He was very encouraging and said, yeah, if Amanda has time to give a presentation to the Farm Bureau membership on this opportunity, that would be amazing. And And if you're too busy, because I know you guys are working with little resources, then if you have a recording for this that we can, distribute to the membership, that would be great. Because I saw this too late to get the word out to people here locally, and I wish more of our members had seen this, because I'm sure they would love to learn about it. If not for this year, for 2-3 years.
Yeah, no problem. This meeting is recorded and it'll definitely be shared on our website. And then I can coordinate with you to see if we can find a time to do a presentation. I do have some travel coming up for next month for business and then personal as well, but we can try to find a window. But this will be recorded and shared if you want to share that information with them as well. There's not too many changes that are going to impact the program this year, but for next year, that 25% match, I think, is going to be a pretty big impact on the program. The state's also going to be required to have a match for specialty crop moving forward beginning next year. So I'm thinking that it'll probably be a pretty competitive year this year because people are going to be wanting to get projects in before that match requirement starts. But that was the major change, and I'm really glad that USDA decided to give everybody a heads up first, because we were concerned about that being effective this year.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. And again, the match can be in kind as well for next year. So and that can include like your personnel time that you spend working on the grant project. You can include that as match. Or if like you're at a university and you're providing the venue, then I'm pretty sure we actually have our call with USDA tomorrow to go over the changes. So if there's anything major, we'll update that to our grants page as well. But I'm pretty sure also if like you're a researcher working on a project, you could probably include the facility costs as match. But I'm not 100% positive on that. We'll clarify that with USDA tomorrow. Emily, what do you mean by CES? All federally funded?
Well, I was just thinking the Cooperative Extension Service, I believe, is mostly federally funded. And so, like, if you had researchers helping you, I don't think they would count as match, but it's something not to worry about for another year.
That's true.
But that would be a good question to ask. And I like
Mhm.
even there's a lot of our state programs, like I'm thinking, community forestry, that is all federally funded. And because, that match piece is really hard. And then, of course, that's
Yeah.
even harder in rural Alaska.
Yeah, I agree. Clarification on the indirect line budget, if you're allowed to ask for 8% or not. No, we're not allowing indirect for sub-grantees. Because so on the specialty crop block grants, the state is the grantee, and then our projects that we fund are the sub-grantee projects. And USDA caps the specialty crop block grant at 8% indirect, and that's on the total award, including grant administrative costs. So that's why we can't allow for indirect on our sub-grantees. There are some grantee organizations that have a very, very high indirect. That would take a lot of those indirect costs, and then we wouldn't have administrative funds to be able to administer the grant program. So we can't include indirect, but if you have, like, say you wanted to include like a bookkeeper or support staff, you could possibly include that as personnel costs on your project, but you'd have to determine and put in your justification like why they're essential to the project itself, and what hours of their time they're going to be contributing to the project, things like that, how their staff time is going to be supporting the project. But it can't include, and the specialty crop block grant is also, it has to be very project specific, so it can't include like general building rental and maintenance costs or computer costs or things like that. all of the costs in this program have to be specific, project specific. And I know it's not clear on USDA's form, because that's not a USDA requirement, that's just our state requirement. It might be a different policy per state, just depending on what their policies are and their resources and the funding that they get through USDA through this grant program as well. In good news, one final thing before we end, that Alaska has actually received a higher amount this year than we have in previous years. We typically receive about 250,000 each year for the specialty crop block grant. And that was increased this year. So we will be receiving about 305,000. So about roughly 50,000 more than we typically receive from USDA. So that was some exciting news that'll be some additional projects that we can fund. Okay, if any other questions before we end the meeting?
Yeah, Amanda, Mike Williams at Eagle Song. One more question.
Sure.
Are grant applications ever funded at a lesser amount than what was requested?
Have we ever funded projects that like at a lesser amount than what was proposed?
Yes.
We have done that in the past here at the division. But I typically don't like to do that because then that can sometimes change the scope of the project. So I know in previous staff here have sometimes reduced the budget on all the awardees to fund as many projects as possible. But again, like if that's changing, you know, what the overall project's able to achieve or the scope of the project, I try to kind of stay away from doing that if possible. Of course, if you have like an expense that's not an eligible expense on there, but the overall project scope is allowed, then we might do some budget adjustments that way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, yep. Okay, well, if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to send out an email. Again, if you can send it to the dag.scbg@alaska.gov, that would be preferred because then there's a couple staff monitoring that. And again, the deadline for applications is May 20th at 5 p.m. on the template. And if you have any issues opening the template, please reach out and we can try to walk you through that. And thank you everyone so much for attending today. Okay, have a good day.